Good evening, darlings. So, YouTube user Izuna Uchiha left a bunch of lovely little comments and asked, if I had a daughter, how would I treat her different than my son, and how would I have raised her? You know, it's true there would be some differences, of course. Sort of the type of early training I would have given a daughter, very, very different. Of course, she would have been trained, as all young elf maidens are, in things like medicine and poisons, very important skills, and of course the very important job of baking. Um, whereas my son had to be trained in things like cooking, baking is solely the realm of women. Although there are some exceptions these days, but typically that's sort of how things go for us. Um, I think it's very important to note that we do treasure our daughters just as much as we do our sons. I know sort of humans don't seem to do that for some odd reason. We have no problems with having female fighters. That there's just something that for some reason humans don't seem to be interested in, and I think it's a great shame. Some of the greatest fighters have been women. They often don't get recorded by mortal histories, but there's so many powerful elven women out there, and I think in some ways my expectations would possibly have been a little more extreme had I had a daughter. I would have made sure she was trained in everything to the utmost. Not that I didn't have my son trained that way, but um, I think I would have expected, as she was a girl, that she would naturally take to any weapon skill whatsoever, and I would expect her to be proficient immediately with all of them. It's been noted several times, that elven women just have more of an affinity for fighting. Not that they're more aggressive by any means, but just that they tend to more naturally take to it. So they require less training. That's sort of a stereotype, I suppose. But I admit that being raised rather traditionally, and particularly at that time, I would have expected that. And she would have spent a lot more time with my wife than with me, of course, because it's a mother's job to train their daughter in all of the elven arts. So I think the little precious time that I did have, which of course is even less because, of course, of our status in society, I would have tried to spoil her rotten. But at the same time, I'd have to be sort of harsh as well, because she'd be expected to be a warrior queen, and so as a result, I think it would have been a little bit harder. I feel like with my son, particularly as he got older, I sort of realized I was holding on a little bit too tight, so I sort of gave him more freedoms. But I may not have been that way with a daughter, and that's perhaps unfair of me, but I think just because of sort of our gender roles, that's how it would have been. And as far as how I would have raised her, unfortunately, I would have much less say in the matter. It would be much more up to her mother. Of course, after her mother would have passed, it would have fallen to me, but I would have had to have sort of elder elven maids come to help me with that and making those decisions, because there's certain decisions that cannot be made by a man, and so I would need a council of elder females to do that for me. Of course, I would have a hand in the decision, but it would be on their advice only. So I hope this has been interesting to you, darling. I hope it sort of answers your question, and it doesn't make me seem too unfair, that my son sort of perhaps got away a little easier because he was a boy, but we just have higher expectations for for the women in our society, and I suppose that's um, just sort of how it goes. So I'll have to think more about that. I hadn't really, considered, but now I think I should. So thank you, darling, and ta-ta.